I can't tell you how many times I've heard, "I'm so sorry," from someone who doesn't know what else to say. What I mistakenly thought was the first piece of the puzzle arrived in the fall of 2012. I can still remember the sound of Crystal setting plates on the kitchen table after the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found my 65-year-old pastor standing on our tiny front porch alone. Nan, his wife, wasn't behind him or waiting in the car. I shot a glance over to our kitchen, which held only 3 place settings, all on one end of the table. I welcomed Woody inside our home, but my heart was racing. I wondered what sin or hypocrisy in my life could have necessitated an intervention. In the church we shared with Woody, we referred to these conversations as "help me understand conversations." I racked my brain to think of any lies I could have been called on. My mind jumped there because back in 1998 on our first date, I asked Crystal, "If you came with a warning label, what would it be?" She replied, "Be real with me." Over our 25 years together, I don't know anyone who has pursued truth and the health truth brings more than Crystal has. For a decade, her only tattoo was the Japanese symbol for truth. She's a walking lie detector, and she's called me on my spin more times than I can count. So in the 10 paces from our front door to our dinner table, I raced through a personal inventory. Woody and Crystal must have seen those mental gymnastics playing out in my eyes. "You're not in trouble," Woody interjected. We took our seats at the table, prayed, and then it was Crystal, not our pastor, who did the talking. Crystal is a missionary kid and the missions director at our church. She takes groups to Nicaragua each year to work with those whose lives have been marred by sex trafficking. Since more than a third of the women Crystal disciples in the States have endured sexual harassment or assault, she carefully prepares women for what might be triggering moments. Across our dinner table, my wife shared that in one of those pre-trip planning meetings, Ruthie, one of my kid's sister's friends, had confided in Crystal that my dad had sexually molested her while she had attended his church a decade earlier. Crystal wanted Woody to be present when she told me because she worried that I would have an irrational response. It was a gut punch for sure, but I had more questions than exaggerated emotions. This young woman had gone from being one of my sister's friends to one of my friends in our now shared adulthood. Crystal had helped her find her first 2 jobs when she moved to our area. Ruthie later came on staff at our church. I hated this for Ruthie. And I hated this for my mom. Roughly a decade earlier, my dad had admitted to cheating on her with a college co-ed. That revelation came just a year or 2 before the incidents I was now learning Ruthie had endured. For some reason, neither that night nor in the years afterward, the nickel didn't drop in my head that what my dad had called an affair could have been a series of sexual assaults. At the time of Ruthie's revelations, what my dad claimed as an affair sounded like a gateway drug to sexual deviancy that eventuated in pedophile behavior. I have a mostly blank hard drive in regard to the weeks that followed that watershed dinner with Woody. I don't remember any of my conversations with Crystal, Ruthie, or anyone else about the revelations. What I do remember is that Ruthie asked me to drive up to my parents' house to confront her abuser. I felt so honored to be trusted with that role, especially as the son of that abuser. Pushing back against my dad had been physically and emotionally dangerous for me in high school and college, but I steeled myself for this showdown. My dad agreed to talk to Ruthie in the privacy of his Ford Windstar parked in his driveway. I joined them as both moral support for Ruthie and as a witness to my dad's reaction. As the sun rose over the recently harvested soybean field behind his house, Ruthie unburdened her heart. She didn't threaten legal ramifications. She didn't threaten to go public. She firmly reminded him of what he stole from her and why it wasn't a small matter.